so many things that we're on the other side of a lot of life experience that's happened, and also that we have.
For 15 years, Trevor Engelson said nothing. He watched the Netflix documentaries, he watched the Oprah interview, he watched the memoir that burned every bridge it touched land on bestseller lists around the world. He watched every carefully constructed chapter of the story Meghan Markle told the world about who she is and where she came from. And through all of it, he said nothing. Not because he had nothing to say, he had everything to say. He simply chose not to say it. Until now. The man who married Meghan before Harry ever knew her name has broken his silence. And the words he chose after 15 years of careful quiet have left everyone who has heard them struggling to find an adequate response, including Harry. Who Trevor Engelson is, the man the Sussex narrative erased. Before we get to what Trevor Engelson said, we need to understand who he is, because the public account of Meghan Markle's life has always treated him as a footnote, a brief chapter in a longer story that was always heading somewhere more significant than a Hollywood marriage that ended in divorce, a name that appears in the biographical context of her pre-Harry years and then disappears from the narrative because the narrative requires it to disappear. That treatment is deliberate. And understanding why it is deliberate tells you more about what Trevor represents to the Sussex story than anything he has yet said publicly. Trevor Engelson is a film producer. He has worked in Hollywood for over 2 decades, building a career that has nothing to do with his marriage to Meghan, and everything to do with the specific and unglamorous work of developing projects from the concept to screen in an industry that consumes most of the people who attempt it. He has credits that span television and film. He has relationships in the entertainment industry that predate his marriage to Meghan and that have survived its dissolution and the particular public dimension that her subsequent life has given their shared history. He is, in the professional sense, a functioning and respected figure in the world that Meghan was navigating when they met. He met Meghan Markle in 2004. She was 23 years old. He was 28. The relationship that developed between them was not a casual Hollywood connection. It was sustained, committed. They were together for years before they married in September 2011, years during which Trevor was actively involved in the development of her career. In the specific Hollywood reality of someone using their professional relationships and their industry standing to create opportunities for the person they were with. Sources close to Trevor describe his investment in Meghan's career during those years as genuine and significant, not transactional. The investment of someone who believed in the person he was with and who used what he had to give her what she needed. The marriage lasted approximately 2 years. It ended in August 2013 when Meghan filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. The specific circumstances of the ending have never been publicly characterized by Meghan in any meaningful detail. The Sussex narrative, across all of its various public iterations, has consistently treated the first marriage as a sealed chapter, acknowledged in biographical context, never examined, never given the kind of personal reflection that Meghan has applied to virtually every other significant period of her life in her various public accounts. That consistent absence of examination is itself a choice, and choices about what to examine and what to leave in the biographical background are never neutral. They reflect an understanding of what examination would produce, of what a fully examined account of the first marriage would add to the picture of Meghan Markle that the public narrative is designed to present. The picture the Sussex narrative has always presented is one of a woman whose pre-Harry life was the necessary prelude to the story that actually matters. A period of becoming, of developing the values and the voice and the specific kind of moral clarity that eventually brought her to the point of being the person Harry fell in love with, and the institution could not contain. The pre-Harry years exist in the narrative as context, not as territory whose specific details could complicate the story that follows. Trevor Engelson complicates the story that follows, not because he is hostile, not because he has spent 15 years nursing a grievance and waiting for the moment to deploy it destructively, but because he was there, for a significant and formative period of Meghan's life, in a relationship whose depth and duration gave him an understanding of who she actually was during those years that sits alongside the version she is presented to the world and does not always match it. He knows things, not the things of tabloid curiosity or celebrity gossip, the things that only people who have been genuinely close to someone over a sustained period know. The texture of who she was when nobody was performing for an audience. The specific qualities she showed in situations that were not designed to produce a public impression. The actual Meghan Markle of the 2010s, before the royal chapter, before the global narrative, before the machinery of the Sussex brand, made her a figure whose public identity was managed with the sophistication of a major commercial operation. The Sussex narrative has always depended on Trevor maintaining his silence about those things. Not because a single person's account of a failed marriage is automatically credible or automatically damaging, but because a specific detailed first-person account from someone with direct personal knowledge of the person at the center of the story, delivered after 15 years of demonstrable restraint, carries a weight that anonymous sources and investigative reporting and hostile briefings do not carry. Trevor's silence has been his most valuable asset to the Sussex narrative, and his decision to end it has apparently been understood by the people managing that narrative as something that requires a response for which they have not fully prepared. The question of why now is the one that sources are most careful about. The various pressures and considerations that have shaped his calculation across 15 years are not simple. The legal dimension, the professional one, the personal one, of a man who has built a new life, remarried, had children, and moved well beyond the specific chapter of his past that the public interest in him has always focused on. Something shifted the calculation. Something made the cost of continuing the silence exceed the cost of ending it. Something produced the specific determination that 15 years was enough and that the moment to speak had arrived. We will get to what he said, but understanding who he is and what his silence has meant makes what he said considerably more significant than it would be without that context. The man the Sussex narrative erased has found his voice, and the narrative is not prepared for it. 15 years of silence. What keeping it cost him. Most people, when they are wronged publicly, find a way to respond publicly. It is the natural human impulse to correct the record, to provide the context that the public account left out, to occupy the space that your absence from a narrative creates before someone else fills it in ways that do not serve you. Trevor Engelson did not do that. And understanding why requires sitting with the specific reality of what the public account of Meghan's life has done to the shared chapter that includes him. The Oprah interview aired in March 2021. It was watched by an estimated 49 million people in the United States and the United Kingdom combined. In it, Meghan provided a detailed and emotionally resonant account of her pre-royal life as context for the story she was telling about what happened inside the palace. She talked about her sense of self, her values, the person she was before Harry, and the person Harry helped her become more fully. The first marriage is not meaningfully present in that account. It is the absence in the biographical context, the gap between the years of building a career and the arrival of Harry, that the narrative treats as a period of individual development rather than a shared life with a specific person who contributed to who she was in specific and documented ways. Trevor watched that interview. Sources close to him describe his response as one that he processed privately, without the public statement that many people in his position would have been tempted to release, without the briefings to journalists or the pointed social media activity that would have signaled to the watching world that the man who was not in the narrative had thoughts about its omissions. He absorbed it and said nothing. The Netflix documentary followed in 2022, a 6-episode production whose scope extended across the full arc of Meghan and Harry's story, from their meeting through to the departure and its aftermath. The biographical material in the early episodes touched more directly on the pre-Harry period, on who Meghan was professionally, on the world she was navigating, on the experiences and the relationships that shaped the person Harry met. Trevor Engelson's name appears in the documentary's biographical treatment, with the specific brevity of a fact that is acknowledged because it cannot be omitted without creating a more obvious gap, and examined with the minimum depth that acknowledgement requires. 2 episodes, 6 hours of content. A marriage of 2 years following a relationship of 7 years, produced without any input from the man whose life it intersected with for nearly a decade, characterized through the lens of the person who chose the narrative's perspective and whose interest in that characterization is not neutral. Trevor watched that too, and said nothing. Then the memoir, published in January 2023. A book whose scope and whose specificity about the private lives of the people it describes generated legal responses from multiple directions simultaneously. The palace, the family members, the various individuals whose private conduct was characterized in ways they disputed. The memoir's treatment of Meghan's pre-Harry life carries the specific quality of someone who has been the author of her own story for long enough to have developed a fluency in presenting it that makes the gaps and the selective emphases difficult to notice unless you have access to the version of events that the gaps are creating space to avoid. Trevor has that access. He is one of the very few people alive who knows what the memoir's treatment of the years they shared together is not saying, what the selective emphasis is emphasizing away from, what the biographical portrait of a woman developing her identity and her values and her sense of herself across those years looks like when it is measured against the specific reality of how those years actually unfolded from the perspective of someone who was inside them. He read the memoir, he processed it, he spoke to the people around him whose counsel he trusts, and sources familiar with his response describe the specific quality of a person sitting with something that they have chosen not to act on for reasons that are clear to them, even when those reasons produce a result that feels unjust. The professional dimension of his silence has never been fully examined publicly. Trevor operates in Hollywood, in a specific ecosystem of relationships and projects and development deals and the sustained network of professional connections that a career in independent film production depends on. The Sussex brand, at its peak in 2021 and 2022, occupied a position in that ecosystem that created specific professional considerations for anyone whose public response to the Sussex narrative could be characterized as hostile or self-interested. Netflix, whose deal with the Sussexes was worth the figures that the entertainment press documented, is a significant player in the ecosystem Trevor works within. The commercial relationships that the Sussex brand connected to in its peak period touched multiple dimensions of the Hollywood professional landscape that Trevor navigates. The calculation around speaking involved not just the personal dimension of what he had to say, and the legal dimension of what saying it might expose him to. It involved the professional dimension of operating in a world where the person you are speaking about has powerful commercial relationships with the people whose support your own projects depend on. That calculation has changed, not because Trevor's professional circumstances have fundamentally shifted, because the Sussex brand's commercial power has eroded to the point where the professional cost of speaking has reduced to a level that no longer outweighs the personal cost of continued silence. The Netflix deal has contracted. The Hollywood relationships that made the Sussex adjacency professionally dangerous to challenge have cooled in ways that the public record of the Sussex brand's commercial trajectory documents clearly. The protection that the Sussex brand's commercial power provided for the narrative it constructed around Meghan's life has diminished, and the silence that protection encouraged is ending in its wake. Something specific happened that pushed Trevor past the threshold that the eroded commercial protection had already lowered. Sources describe it in terms that reference the investigative reporting that has been emerging about Meghan's pre-royal life, the specific claims that have surfaced through multiple channels about the period that their marriage and relationship sit within, the yacht allegations, the character claims, the pattern of accounts from people who were present for parts of that period, whose consistency with each other has been building towards something that Trevor apparently decided he was no longer willing to leave unaddressed by his continued silence. His silence was not protecting the truth. It was leaving a space that other accounts were filling in ways that the truth, as Trevor experienced it, does not straightforwardly support. And that realization appears to have been the final shift in the calculation that has kept him quiet for 15 years. What Trevor said, the account that changes everything. There is a specific quality to a first-person account from someone who has been silent for a very long time. It carries a weight that contemporaneous accounts do not carry. The person speaking has had years to decide what they will and will not say. Years to identify the specific details that matter most. Years to understand which elements of their shared experience with the subject of their account are the ones whose public expression will do the most to correct the specific distortions that their silence has been allowing to persist. A person who has had 15 years to decide what to say when they finally speak is not giving you their first reaction to events. They are giving you their most considered one. That is what Trevor Engelson has given. And the specific content of what he has chosen to say, after 15 years of deciding what that content should be, is the question that this section exists to answer. The full account Trevor has provided has not been released through a single public channel in a format that allows its complete documentation in any current public record. What sources familiar with its content describe as an account that has been shared in specific and deliberate ways, with people whose professional and personal positions give his words a specific amplifying effect. Through the kind of targeted disclosure that someone who understands the media landscape deploys when they want their account to travel through credibility rather than through spectacle. He has not held a press conference. He has not published a memoir or given a televised interview. He has spoken to specific people in specific contexts, in ways that have produced the particular kind of secondary and tertiary account from credible sources that the investigative reporting landscape generates when a primary source decides to engage without making themselves the direct center of the story. That approach is itself communicative. It is the approach of someone who is not interested in being a celebrity version of an aggrieved ex-husband, who is not seeking the attention or the commercial opportunity that his position adjacent to one of the world's most covered public figures could generate if he chose to pursue them. He is interested in the record, in what the record says and does not say, in placing his account within the landscape of what is known about the period they shared in a way that corrects the omissions without turning himself into the story. The specific content of what Trevor has said covers several dimensions of their shared history. The first is the marriage itself, the reality of their relationship during the years before and during the marriage, the specific character and conduct of the person he was in that relationship with. Sources describe his account of this dimension as notably specific, not a general characterization of Meghan as someone different from the public image. Specific incidents, specific moments, the kind of particular detail that gives an account the texture of genuine memory, rather than the smoothness of a constructed narrative designed to produce a specific impression. The specific incidents Trevor has described address things that the Sussex narrative has always presented through implication and absence. The nature of how Meghan treated the people around her during the period of her rising career, the specific quality of her engagement with the relationships that were useful to her at various stages of her professional development, and the quality of her disengagement from those relationships when their utility changed, the manner of the marriage's ending, and the specific context that surrounded it, the particular details of how a person navigates the transition from one chapter to a more advantageous one. These are not allegations in the formal sense. They are not claims of specific wrongdoing that produce legal consequences. They are characterizations, specific, detailed, first-person characterizations from someone who was close enough to the subject over long enough a period to speak with the authority of genuine personal knowledge. And the characterizations they produce are not consistent with the version of Meghan Markle that the Sussex brand has been presenting to the world. The second dimension involves the specific period of their marriage's ending and what immediately followed it. This is the territory that sources describe as the most significant in terms of its implications for the broader investigative picture that has been building around Meghan's pre-royal life. The specific circumstances of the divorce filing, the timeline of events in the months surrounding the marriage's conclusion, the relationships and the activities, and the specific decisions that characterize that period from Trevor's perspective. This dimension of his account connects to the yacht allegations and the investigative reporting around Meghan's early career in a way that gives Trevor's first-person experience a specific relevance to claims that have until now been supported primarily by anonymous and second-hand sources. His account provides a contextual framework within which those claims sit differently than they do when they exist only in the landscape of anonymous allegation. The third dimension is the one that sources describe as producing the strongest reactions from the people who have heard it. It involves the specific nature of how Meghan's public characterization of herself and her pre-royal life relates to the private reality that Trevor was present for. Not just the omissions, the specific instances where the public account and the private reality diverge in ways that go beyond the normal license that personal narrative allows for selective emphasis and generous self-presentation. Trevor is not claiming that every element of the Sussex narrative is false. He is making a more specific and in many ways more devastating argument. He is saying that the version of the pre-Harry years that Meghan has presented to the world is not just incomplete, it is constructed, shaped with the deliberate intent of presenting a character whose qualities and whose history justify the story that follows, and that the construction required the omission of specific elements of the actual history that his presence in that history gives him direct and personal knowledge of. Sources describe that specific argument as the one that has produced the most significant reactions from the people who have heard it. Because it is not a claim that requires believing a hostile ex-husband over a sympathetic public figure, it is a claim that can be tested against the documented record, against the timeline, against the specific details that exist in sources other than Trevor's account, and that his account places in a context that changes how they read. That testability is what makes his silence ending so significant, and what makes the reactions it has produced in the people most affected by it so revealing about what those people understand his account to mean for the credibility of everything they have built. Harry's reaction, the husband who heard what he was never supposed to hear. There are things you can unknow once you have known them. Harry has spent the better part of 5 years constructing a public identity around a specific and unwavering certainty. The certainty that the woman he chose is who she presented herself to be. That the story she told him about herself was true in its essential character. That the values she demonstrated and the version of herself she offered were genuine reflections of who she actually is, rather than a presentation calibrated to produce the response it produced. That certainty is the foundation of everything, not just the marriage, the entire post-royal project, the decisions that cannot be undone, the family he left behind, the bridges he burned with language that is preserved permanently in a memoir that the world has read, the public statements that built his post-royal identity around the claim that Meghan was the person he needed her to be to justify everything the choice to be with her has cost him. If that certainty is wrong, if the foundation it rests on is not what Harry believed it was, the implications do not stay in the marriage. They radiate outward into every decision, every sacrifice, every irreversible act that the certainty made necessary. Trevor Engelson's account has apparently reached Harry. Sources familiar with the situation describe the manner in which it reached him with careful indirection. Not through a direct communication from Trevor, not through any channel that Trevor controlled or that he intended to reach Harry specifically. Through the secondary spread of an account that has been shared with specific people in specific contexts and that has traveled through the particular networks that connect the Hollywood and media world that both Harry and Trevor adjacent to a point where Harry's awareness of its substance became inevitable. He heard it. And the reaction that sources describe is not the reaction of a man confidently dismissing an account he knows to be false. It is the reaction of a man who has been presented with specific, detailed, first-person information from someone with undeniable personal knowledge, and who is processing what that information means against everything he has said and done and given up in the service of the certainty it challenges. Sources use the word speechless in the specific and non-metaphorical sense, not the speechlessness of someone rendered temporarily inarticulate by strong emotion, the speechlessness of someone whose usual facility with language, which Harry possesses and has deployed extensively across the memoir and the interviews and the various public accounts of his own story, has temporarily failed him because the specific situation he is in does not have available the words that would adequately characterize what he is experiencing. The particular quality of Harry's silence in the immediate response to Trevor's account becoming known to him has been described by sources in terms that require sitting with for a moment. Because Harry is someone whose response to challenges has historically been verbal, he processes through language, through the articulation of his experience in public and private forms. The memoir is the most extensive expression of this, but it runs through everything he has done publicly in the post-royal period. He speaks, he characterizes, he gives language to his experience with a specificity and a fluency that has been both the source of the post-royal project's credibility and the source of its most significant damage to the relationships it discussed. The absence of that language in response to Trevor's account is therefore not a minor detail. It is significant in the specific way that the departure from a well-established pattern is always significant. It tells you something about the nature of the challenge the account represents. It is not a challenge Harry can respond to publicly without drawing attention to it. Any public response to Trevor's account from Harry's direction would amplify the account rather than diminish it, would tell the watching world that whatever Trevor has said is significant enough to require a response, would open a conversation about the specific content of the account that the Sussex communication strategy has no interest in opening. The playbook for challenges of this nature from the Sussex camp has always been to deny through implication, while not specifically engaging the substance. That playbook requires the challenger to be sufficiently less credible than the subject that the non-specific denial is sufficient. Trevor Engelson is not sufficiently less credible. He is a professional figure with a documented history of restraint. A man who has spent 15 years demonstrating through his silence that he is not someone who deploys his personal history for commercial or vindictive purposes. His sudden decision to end that silence carries precisely the credibility weight that his long maintenance of it produced. And that credibility is not something the Sussex communications operation can undermine through the standard mechanism of source questioning that has served them in previous challenges. Harry understands this. Whatever else can be said about his judgment in specific situations, he is not unintelligent about the media landscape or about the specific dynamics of credibility that govern how accounts of this type are received. He knows what Trevor's account represents. He knows what Trevor's 15 years of silence before it represent. And he knows that the combination of those two things produces a challenge to the narrative foundation of his post-royal life that his usual facility with language does not have an available response to. The private dimension is the more significant one, what Harry is sitting with internally as a result of what he has heard, not the communications challenge, the personal one, of a man who needs to reconcile what Trevor's account says about the person he married with, what his certainty about that person has required him to do and say and give up over the course of 5 years. Sources who are close enough to Harry's situation to have some visibility into this describe a man operating under a specific and acute form of cognitive strain. The strain of someone whose internal processing is working very hard on a problem that has no comfortable resolution, because the resolutions available to him all require accepting something that is either personally or publicly devastating. He can decide Trevor is wrong, that the account is the product of bitterness and self-interest, and that the 15 years of silence were not restraint, but simply the absence of opportunity. That interpretation is available to him, but sources suggest it is not sitting comfortably. Because Harry has access to information about the period Trevor is describing that the public does not. And that information does not straightforwardly support the interpretation that Trevor's account is simply an ex-husband's grievance. He can decide Trevor is right, that the account reflects a genuine and accurate version of the person he married in the years before he knew her, that the foundation his certainty rested on was not solid in the way he needed it to be. That interpretation carries implications so severe for the shape of his life that sources describe it as one that Harry cannot yet fully approach in any direct internal way. and he can sit in the space between those two interpretations, processing, neither confirming nor denying to himself, maintaining a productive ambiguity that allows him to continue functioning without requiring the resolution that either interpretation demands. That appears to be where Harry currently is, in the space between knowing and not wanting to know, between the account Trevor has given and the certainty that Harry's entire post-royal identity has been built on requiring to be true. It is not a comfortable space, and the stillness that sources describe is not the stillness of someone at peace with where they are. It is the stillness of someone whose foundation has been shaken in a place they had no map for. What this changes, for Meghan, for Harry, and for the story they told the world. Every narrative has a load-bearing wall, a single structural element whose integrity supports everything else in the construction. Remove it, and the rest does not necessarily collapse immediately. The facade can stand for a while on momentum and habit, and the reluctance of the people inside it to acknowledge what has changed. But the building is no longer sound, and the people who understand construction can see the difference between a structure that is standing because it is solid and one that is standing because it has not yet fully registered what it has lost. The Sussex narrative's load-bearing wall is the character of Meghan Markle as she has presented it, the specific version of herself that she has offered to the world across the Oprah interview and the Netflix documentary and the memoir and the sustained public project of her post-royal identity, a woman of integrity, of values, of the particular kind of moral clarity that justified the most radical personal and institutional decisions she and Harry have made together. That character is not just the emotional center of the Sussex story. It is the commercial premise of the Sussex brand. It is what Netflix bought, what the audience has been purchasing, what the whole edifice of the post-royal project rests on. Trevor Engelson's account attacks that load-bearing wall, not from the outside, where external attacks have always been manageable, because they can be characterized as hostile, as racist, as the product of the institutional forces that the Sussex narrative positions as the antagonists of the story. From the inside, from a place that cannot be characterized as hostile without explaining why the person characterizing it as hostile chose to maintain such deliberate and demonstrable restraint for 15 years before doing so. From the position of someone who was present for the years that the narrative depends on to establish its foundation. The legal dimension of Meghan's response to Trevor's account is the first practical implication of what he has said. The Sussex legal operation has been aggressive and effective across the previous challenges to the narrative. Multiple successful actions against publications that made specific factual claims about Meghan that she disputed, the infrastructure of legal response that has suppressed certain accounts and complicated others. This infrastructure is now apparently being assessed against the specific challenge that Trevor's account represents. That assessment is not straightforward, because the legal approaches that have been effective against published allegations in specific publications operate on terrain that Trevor's account does not currently occupy in the same way. He has not published a book. He has not given a televised interview that produced a documentable set of specific claims that a legal action could target with the precision that previous Sussex legal actions have required. He has spoken in the careful, targeted, deliberately unspectacular way of someone who understands the legal landscape and has chosen a form of disclosure that is effective at placing his account in the public domain while being resistant to the specific legal mechanisms that have suppressed other accounts. Sources familiar with the Sussex legal team's assessment describe the challenge Trevor's account presents as one that does not have the clean resolution that previous legal actions provided. You cannot serve a cease and desist on a conversation. You cannot successfully litigate against the secondary reporting of an account whose primary source has been careful about the form his disclosure takes. You can make the legal environment uncomfortable enough that the amplification of his account through mainstream media channels is complicated by the awareness of potential legal exposure. But that approach has a cost. Every legal action taken or threatened in response to Trevor's account draws attention to the account, confirms its significance. tells the watching world that whatever the first husband of the Duchess of Sussex has said is worth the deployment of the legal machinery that has been so consistently and visibly activated around the Sussex narrative. The choice between legal response and silence is not a comfortable one, and sources suggest the Sussex team is navigating it with a degree of difficulty that the previous cleaner legal challenges did not produce. For the Sussex brand's commercial relationships, the implications of Trevor's account, arriving at this specific moment in the brand's trajectory, are severe in ways that compound existing vulnerabilities. The Netflix relationship is already operating under the contracted terms that the commercial underperformance of the Sussex content produced. The lifestyle brand is building toward commercial relevance from a position of modest rather than commanding audience engagement. The political adjacency has evaporated, the cultural goodwill has thinned, and now, into that landscape of diminished commercial protection, arrives a credible first-person account from the person with the most direct personal knowledge of the years the brand's narrative depends on for its foundation. The timing is not Trevor's fault. He did not choose this moment to speak because the brand was already vulnerable. The calculation that ended his silence was produced by the changes in the landscape described in the previous section. But the timing's effect on the brand is not diminished by the absence of calculated intent behind it. The account lands harder because the protection the brand could once deploy around its narrative has eroded. For Harry specifically, what this changes is the question that every other implication of Trevor's account is ultimately in the service of answering, because Harry is the person whose life choices are most directly implicated in the character of the woman Trevor is describing. Every bridge Harry burned, every irreversible act, every public statement, every private grief, all of it was justified by the certainty that the woman at the center of it was who the narrative required her to be. Trevor's account does not prove that she is not. The account of an ex-husband is not a verdict, it is a perspective. A specific, detailed, credible, long-restrained perspective from someone with direct personal knowledge. But it is still one person's account of another person's character. And character is not determined by any single account, however credible. What it changes is the certainty. The specific, unwavering, publicly demonstrated certainty that Harry has always projected about who Meghan is and why every sacrifice the choice to be with her required was worth making. Certainty of that type can survive external attack. It cannot survive the same challenge arriving from inside the years it claims to know. From the person who was there, who was close, who has no obvious motive for 15 years of silence followed by careful, targeted, legally resistant disclosure other than the motive he has effectively communicated through the specific form his account has taken. He is telling what he knows to be true, and the silence he maintained before telling it is the most powerful endorsement of its credibility that any account could have. Harry is speechless, not because he has nothing to say, because the things he could say require him to know something about his own life that he may not yet be ready to know. Trevor Engelson spent 15 years saying nothing. 15 years of documentaries and interviews and memoirs and the sustained public construction of a narrative that touched directly on the years he shared with the woman at its center. He watched all of it. He processed all of it. And he said nothing. Until the calculation changed. What he has said after 15 years of silence is now in the world, moving through the people who understand what it means and reaching the one person whose certainty it challenges most fundamentally. Harry built everything on a foundation. Trevor just described what that foundation looks like from the inside. Hit subscribe. This story is not finished.